The flashing red and blue lights were already reflecting off my front windows when I turned onto my street. For a split second, I thought I had the wrong address. Same mailbox. Same palm tree leaning too far over the sidewalk. Same silver sedan parked across from my driveway. But the police cruiser sitting in front of my house didn't belong in the picture. Neither did the tight knot forming in my chest. I slowed to a stop behind it. Rain misted the windshield, barely enough to blur the view, but enough to make the world feel distant. My headlights cut across my own garage door, half open. That's when the driver's side door of the cruiser swung open. "Sir," the officer called out, one hand already resting near his holster. "Shut off the engine and step out slowly." I did exactly as told. The engine clicked off. The rain tapped lightly against the roof. My suitcase shifted in the back seat as I opened the door and stepped onto the wet pavement. "What's going on?" I asked calmly. The second officer moved to my passenger side, scanning the car's interior. "We received a call reporting a possible break-in. Caller said the homeowner was out of state and someone had unlawfully entered the property." I almost laughed. I am the homeowner. Across the street, under the warm yellow glow of a porch light, Margaret Keene stood with her arms folded neatly across her chest. President of the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association. The woman who would fine me last year because my trash cans were visible from the street for 20 extra minutes. She smiled politely and gave a small wave. "I just wanted to keep the neighborhood safe," she called out in that soft, practiced voice. "You never know who might sneak into an empty house." Empty. I had been gone 21 days. Not a year. Not abandoned. Just gone for work. The officer asked for my ID. I handed it over. Same name as on the mailbox. Same address as the house behind him. He studied it for a moment, then looked at Margaret. "Ma'am, this confirms he owns the property." Her smile thinned. "Well, I was only trying to be cautious." The other cop cleared his throat. "You need to be more careful with emergency calls. This isn't a criminal matter." They handed my ID back and returned to their cruiser. Margaret didn't move from her porch. "You should be more mindful about leaving your home unattended," she said. "We've had concerns." "We?" I replied. "Our community." I held her gaze. "My community didn't call the cops." "You did." Her smile never reached her eyes. As the cruiser pulled away, the street sank back into silence. The rain slowed to a faint drizzle. Porch lights shut off one by one as neighbors slipped back into their routines. Only Margaret remained. Watching. I rolled my suitcase up the driveway and unlocked the front door. The smell inside instantly told me something was wrong. Not smoke. Not rot. Air that had moved when it shouldn't have. The living room looked untouched. Couch in place. TV where I'd left it. Kitchen clean. No signs of forced entry. The back door was still locked. But when I stepped into my home office, my stomach dropped. The bottom drawer of my filing cabinet was open. I never left it open. Inside, most of the folders were still there: tax records, old contracts, property insurance documents. But one space was empty. The most important one. The original HOA development agreement from when Silver Ridge was first built. The only physical copy I possessed. The document that defined what the HOA could and could not legally enforce. Gone. The rain grew heavier outside. I checked the rest of the house. No broken windows. No damaged locks. No missing electronics. Whoever had been inside hadn't been searching randomly. They had come for something specific. And they found it. I locked every door and window twice before sitting at my desk. My hands rested on the wood longer than necessary, steadying myself. Margaret hadn't just called the cops. She had sent a message. I pulled up my security camera app. The front camera showed nothing unusual. Normal foot traffic. Delivery trucks. Neighbors walking dogs. But when I accessed the backyard footage, my breath caught. There was a 12-minute gap. The camera simply stopped recording. No glitch. No error. Manual shutdown. And when it turned back on, the backyard looked undisturbed. Almost. Except for a shadow near the fence line for half a second before disappearing. I barely slept that night. At sunrise, I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk pulled up the digital file of my HOA's authority structure. On the surface, everything looked normal. Financial controls. Community guidelines. Enforcement rights. Too normal. Because I knew what the original agreement said. And what it didn't. When I returned home, a bright orange violation notice was taped to my front door. Unauthorized vehicle parking, $175 fine. My car was in my own driveway. That was the moment I understood something critical. This wasn't about noise complaints. Or trash cans. Or porch lights. This was a power play. And the person pulling the strings already believed I didn't know what game I was in. That assumption would cost them everything. The first thing I did the next morning was call Rachel Moore. She answered on the second ring. You usually don't call before 8. That's never good. Someone broke into my house last night, I said. They only took one thing. There was a short pause. Which thing? The original HOA development agreement. She didn't speak for a full 3 seconds. Then, quietly, Mark, that's not coincidence. That's containment. By 9 a.m., she was at my house with a portable scanner, a laptop, and the tight expression she usually reserved for corporate fraud cases. I handed her the digital backups I still had saved. Not perfect copies, some scans were incomplete, but enough to cross-reference with county filings. We worked in silence at the dining table while sunlight crept across the floor. Finally, Rachel spoke. Your HOA never legally received lien enforcement powers. The developer planned to transfer them in Phase 3, but Phase 3 was cancelled when the company went under. So everything they've been doing. Illegal, she finished. Every fine. Every threat. Every forced compliance penalty. Voidable. My phone buzzed. Another violation notice. This one for my mailbox height. It had been the same height for 10 years. Rachel looked at the notice and shook her head slowly. They're escalating. Fast. That afternoon, we went to the HOA office. It sat in a beige stucco building at the edge of the neighborhood, nothing intimidating, just sterile. Fluorescent lights. A faded American flag in the corner. The illusion of small administrative power. Trevor Mills, the HOA treasurer, greeted us behind the counter. He looked nervous the moment he saw me. Mark. I didn't expect to see you today. I'm just here for public records, I said calmly. Rachel added, specifically legacy development files. Trevor hesitated. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Those documents were relocated, he said. By who? Rachel asked. By President Keene. For what purpose? For legal review. Rachel leaned forward slightly. By what attorney? Trevor's mouth opened. Then closed. He didn't answer. We left without raising our voices, but as we stepped outside, Rachel exhaled sharply. He's scared, she said. Which means someone higher up is scaring him. That night, my internet cut out at exactly 11:47 p.m. Not the modem. Not the router. The entire service drop. I checked my phone, full signal. No reported outages. When the connection came back 12 minutes later, I received an automated alert from my security company. Backyard camera manually disconnected at 11:49 p.m. Someone was watching my routines. And learning them. The next morning, Rachel called with something in her voice I hadn't heard before. "Mark, I found financial anomalies in the HOA accounts." "How bad?" "Six figures routed through maintenance vendors that don't exist. Landscaping companies with no business licenses. Security contractors with invalid tax IDs." I closed my eyes. And the end point? A private real estate holding company based in Nevada. Shell company. Distance laundering. Someone had turned our neighborhood into a profit machine. And Margaret Keene was either benefiting or being used. 3 more violation notices arrived within 48 hours. Lawn. Window reflection. Garage door paint tone. The fines had doubled. Then tripled. Rachel warned me what would come next. They can't legally foreclose. But they can threaten to. And fear will make some homeowners fold without fighting. That evening, a black SUV idled at the end of my street for nearly 15 minutes. When I stepped onto my porch, it rolled away. No plates. No markings. The next morning, Trevor called me. Whispering. "I can't talk long," he said. "They're watching everything." "Who?" I asked. "The people behind the money. Margaret only signs what they tell her. She thinks she's in control, but she's not. Where are the original documents?" He hesitated. "Storage unit. Off-site. But I don't know which one. I just move boxes." "Trevor, look at me," I said quietly. "If this keeps going, you're going down with her." Silence. "Then, I'll see what I can get." That night, someone tried my back door. Not forcefully. Not urgently. Just enough to test the lock. The handle turned once. Then twice. Then stopped. I didn't open the door. I let the house stay dark. The next day, Rachel uncovered the final piece. Several homeowners had active pre-foreclosure filings initiated by the HOA. No court review, she said. No legal authority. Just threats designed to scare people into selling. To whom? I asked. She pulled up a file. The same Nevada shell company. They weren't just stealing money. They were acquiring the neighborhood itself. At 2:18 p.m., Trevor texted me a photo. A blurry image of stacked storage boxes. One label visible. Silver Ridge Original Development Files. My phone rang immediately after. Unknown number. I answered. "You should stop digging," a man's voice said calmly. Male. Mid-30s. Controlled breathing. No accent I could place. "You're interfering with a transaction already approved above your pay grade." "You broke into my home," I replied. "You left something valuable unattended." A pause. Then, "Some signatures carry more weight than others. You just don't realize whose name you're standing in front of." The call ended. I stood in my living room for a long time, staring at the dark screen of my phone. They thought I was afraid. They were wrong. They had underestimated the one thing they couldn't erase. The legal weight of a properly placed signature. And I had exactly one chance to use it. The Silver Ridge annual HOA meeting had never been this crowded. Cars lined both sides of the street outside the community center. Neighbors stood in clusters under the desert evening sky, voices tight with frustration and curiosity. Everyone had received the latest wave of fines. Everyone had heard whispers about foreclosures. And everyone knew something was wrong, even if no one could say it out loud yet. Inside, rows of metal folding chairs scraped against the floor as people squeezed in. The air buzzed with anger barely contained. I sat near the back, Rachel beside me, laptop sealed in her bag like a concealed weapon. Margaret Keene stood at the podium at the front of the room. Perfect posture. Navy blazer. Pearl necklace. Total control, at least on the surface. Thank you all for attending on such short notice, she said smoothly. I understand emotions are running high. But I assure you that the HOA's actions are fully legal and necessary to protect property values. Murmurs rolled through the crowd. A man near the front stood up. You fined me $3,000 for a fence I've had for 8 years. Margaret raised a calming hand. The enforcement guidelines were updated recently. A woman stood. You threatened foreclosure on my mother's house over lawn gravel. Margaret's jaw tightened. These measures are within our authority. Rachel leaned toward me and whispered, she has no idea what's about to hit her. Margaret straightened. As of this quarter, the HOA's enforcement powers are protected under amended development authority, filed with the county. That was my cue. I stood up. The room quieted instantly, not because of respect, but because everyone sensed something different in the air. Which amendment? I asked calmly. Margaret blinked. Just once. Our legal counsel, she began. No, I said, cutting in. Which amendment number? Which filing date? Which authority transfer? The silence became heavy. People turned in their chairs to look at me. Margaret's eyes narrowed. This is not the forum for baseless accusations. I took a step forward. Actually, this is exactly the forum. I walked down the aisle toward the front. Every footstep echoed. Rachel followed a few paces behind me. I was out of state 3 weeks ago, I continued. During that time, someone broke into my house and stole the original HOA development agreement. Gasps rippled through the room. Margaret stiffened. That's an outrageous claim. I reached the podium and plugged a drive into the projector. The screen behind her lit up. The first slide appeared. Original development contract, Silver Ridge Estates. The room went dead silent. This, I said, is the only agreement that ever governed this neighborhood. I advanced the slide. Here's the clause you don't want anyone to see. Highlighted text appeared on the screen. Lien enforcement authority to be transferred upon completion of Phase 3 development. I zoomed in on the next line. Phase 3, cancelled. Rachel stepped forward beside me. Which means the HOA was never granted lien power. Never granted foreclosure authority. Never granted forced compliance beyond voluntary fines. People stood up. Shouting erupted. That means. You can't. You stole from us. Margaret backed one step from the podium. These documents are incomplete. They're authenticated, Rachel said calmly. Digitally verified with county metadata. I clicked to the next slide. HOA financial records appeared. Real numbers. Shell accounts. Fake vendors. Money flowing outward, not inward. Over $600,000, I said, my voice steady, was diverted from your fines into private real estate trusts tied to a Nevada shell company. Margaret's face went white. A man in the front row shouted, "You stole our money?" She snapped, "You don't understand how administrative finances work." Rachel didn't raise her voice. Then explain these transfers routed through maintenance vendors that don't exist. Margaret's hands trembled on the podium. I tapped once more on the remote. The final slide appeared. Pre-foreclosure notices, internal HOA files. Addresses filled the screen. Neighbors looked at their own homes displayed like targets. That's when the room exploded. People surged forward. Shouting. Crying. Rage spilling over. This was illegal. You tried to take my house. Someone hurled a binder across the room. It hit the wall and burst open in a storm of paper. At the back doors of the community center, uniformed officers stepped inside. Margaret saw them and made her move. She lunged for the laptop on the podium. Too late. Security grabbed her arm. She twisted, tried to pull free, her calm finally cracking into raw panic. "You don't understand who you're messing with," she screamed. An officer moved in from the side. "Ma'am, turn around." As the handcuffs snapped shut, the room fell into stunned silence. Margaret looked straight at me. For the first time, not with control. With fear. "You think this ends with me," she whispered as officers pulled her away. "You have no idea who actually runs this." The doors closed behind her. The room stood frozen. Then a quiet wave of realization moved through the crowd. Rachel faced the homeowners. "Your fines are frozen effective immediately. Any attempted foreclosure is legally void. You'll all be contacted for formal restitution." A man's voice trembled. "So, we get our money back?" Rachel nodded. "Yes." The crowd erupted again, this time in relief, grief, and gratitude all tangled together. People surrounded me. Hands on my shoulders. Quiet thank yous. Tearful hugs. But I couldn't breathe easy yet. Because Margaret's last words wouldn't leave my head. That night, after the police lights faded and the parking lot emptied, I drove home alone. My porch light flipped on as I turned onto my street. That's when I saw the black SUV again. Parked at the curb. Engine idling. Someone inside. Watching my house. As I pulled into my driveway, the SUV rolled forward and disappeared into the dark. On my front door was an envelope. Inside was a single printed line. "Some signatures don't belong to homeowners." My phone rang immediately after. Unknown number. I didn't answer. But the voicemail came through anyway. "You made this public," the same calm male voice said. "Now it belongs to all of us." The line went dead. And for the first time since the HOA meeting, I realized something far worse than Margaret had just been exposed. She had only been the front. And the real war was just beginning. The morning after Margaret Keene was arrested, Silver Ridge woke up to a silence it had never known. No violation notices. No HOA emails. No sudden towing threats. No fear. Police cruisers still lingered near the community center. News vans replaced them by noon. Neighbors gathered in small groups along sidewalks, speaking in low, uncertain voices, as if the neighborhood itself needed time to remember how to breathe. By 10 a.m., my phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Local reporters. Legal advocacy groups. Homeowners I barely knew. People who had lived under Margaret's reign for years and finally felt the weight lift. Rachel arrived shortly after, carrying 2 thick folders and exhaustion in her eyes. "It's official," she said. "Accounts are frozen. Every improper fine is flagged for refund. Foreclosures are voided. The state opened a criminal investigation this morning." I leaned back against the kitchen counter, letting that sink in. "We actually pulled it off," I said. Rachel gave a small smile. "You did." With one missing document and one very loud meeting. The refunds began within days. Direct deposits hit accounts across the neighborhood like an aftershock of relief. Some families cried when they saw the numbers. Others stared in disbelief, as if afraid it might vanish again. Trevor Mills turned himself in voluntarily. He didn't fight the charges. Testified fully. Named names. Margaret's charges multiplied: fraud, conspiracy, obstruction, criminal trespass, financial coercion. Her attorney tried to frame her as a misguided administrator who had lost control of her board. The evidence buried that argument in minutes. Margaret made bail. And then she disappeared. Her house was listed as vacant within 48 hours. No forwarding address. No phone activity. Just gone. Life in Silver Ridge changed in strange, quiet ways. People walked at night again. Kids rode bikes past sunset. Porch lights stayed on, but no one felt watched by them anymore. An interim HOA board formed quickly. Volunteers. Accountants. Retired teachers. People who genuinely cared about running a community, not ruling one. At their first open meeting, they voted unanimously to suspend all enforcement activity until a full legal restructuring could be completed. Every decision was recorded publicly. Every dollar tracked. For the first time, transparency felt real. On the surface, the nightmare was over. But not for me. A week after Margaret vanished, a courier delivered a secure envelope to my front door. No return address. Inside was a single document. A digitally filed HOA amendment. County stamped. Legally logged. Timestamped 6 months before Margaret ever moved a dollar. Rachel confirmed it within minutes. This amendment, she said slowly, is what she used to justify the enforcement powers. Someone filed it before she touched anything. Who? I asked. She shook her head. IP addresses masked through layered proxies. Clean. Professional. Which meant Margaret hadn't created the monster. She had simply been handed the keys. That night, I sat on my back porch, staring at the dark stretch of trees beyond my fence. The air was still. Too still. Then motion lights flared at the far edge of the yard. No one inside the fence. No footprints. No sound. Just movement beyond my property line. Watching. Waiting. 2 days later, Trevor vanished from protective custody. No signs of struggle. No ransom. No body. The official statement read, "Voluntary disappearance under witness protection uncertainty." Rachel didn't believe it. Neither did I. Silver Ridge healed slowly after that. But the world outside it seemed to tighten. Strange things followed. My credit file was run through systems I'd never authorized. My old employer received anonymous inquiries about my legal background. 2 shell companies dissolved overnight, traces of money evaporating before subpoenas could reach them. Someone was cleaning up. And they were doing it efficiently. 3 weeks later, Rachel came to my house without calling first. Her face was pale. "They're consolidating properties," she said. "Across multiple states. HOA-controlled neighborhoods. Same pattern." "How many?" I asked. She swallowed. "Dozens." Silver Ridge wasn't the target. It was a test. A sandbox. A proof of concept. Someone, somewhere, was quietly weaponizing community governance structures, turning HOAs into acquisition tools. Using fines, pressure, and legal ambiguity to push families out and strip neighborhoods down to assets. Margaret had been one operator. One pawn. One disposable face. And I was the homeowner who happened to trip the wire. A month passed. No break-ins. No threats. No calls. Then one evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, I saw the black SUV for the last time. Parked across the street. Engine off. Lights dark. A single silhouette inside. It stayed there for nearly a full minute. Then it rolled forward slowly and disappeared down the block. On my porch sat another envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Careful. Precise. Only one line. You closed one door. Others remain open. That was the last message I ever received. Silver Ridge stabilized. The interim board became permanent. The neighborhood thrived again. But every night when I lock my doors, I listen longer than I used to. Not because I'm afraid of Margaret Keene. But because I now understand something far more unsettling. The real enemy never needed to break into my house again. They already had what they wanted. They learned how easily power could be hidden inside harmless rules. And how dangerous one informed signature could truly be. The neighborhood won back its peace. But the system that tried to steal it? That system is still out there. Watching. Waiting. And now. It knows exactly who stopped it once.